Alrighty, as we get started, I just wanted to encourage everyone to follow us on social media. Connect with us on YouTube by subscribing to our channel at Grade Level Reading. On LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, follow us at Campaign for GLR, and on X, follow us at Reading by Third. Please use the hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learn from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Once again, welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I'll be behind the scenes helping to produce the conversation. Before we get started, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge our enterprise and programmatic funders, as well as our individual donors. Your support not only allows us to hold these vital conversations, but also helps us create meaningful opportunities to share insights, foster connections, and build the CGLR community. Thank you. And as we get started, I have a few housekeeping details I want to share with all of you. First, we would love for you to introduce yourself. So please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. Be sure when responding to select everyone in the meeting so that we all know who is here and can see each other's chat messages. All attendees are currently in listen-only mode and you've joined the meeting muted, but we encourage you to post any thoughts that you have in the chat box and any questions that you might have in the Q&A box. Our panelists will be keeping an eye on that Q&A box to see what questions are posted, and they will be responding to those questions that you post during the discussion. The webinar is also being live streamed on Facebook, and a link to the recording, as well as any slides, bios, and resources will be sent in a follow-up email to all who registered for the conversation. And lastly, we will be posting a brief on-screen poll during Q&A and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. Last thing, before we get started, I just wanted to turn your attention to some of our upcoming webinars that we have. Later this afternoon, we hope you will join us again for a conversation in continuation of our Children as Collateral Damage series, this time with a focus on SNAP and its far-reaching benefits for children. That conversation will be at 3 p.m. Eastern this afternoon, so we hope you can join us again. Next week, on June 17th, we have an exciting doubleheader. First, a funder-to-funder conversation, where we will be engaging with local funders and leaders of affiliate stations in their communities to learn and explore how public media resources enhance and reinforce funders' philanthropic efforts to support children's early school success, and how philanthropy can respond to ensure high-quality children's multimedia. That same day at 3 p.m., we'll have a conversation on material hardship and how it matters, parent voices from the Rapid Survey. And on the 24th, we'll have another doubleheader. There's only one session listed here, but we will have a peer exchange at 12:30 p.m. and the kickoff of our EdTech Institute at 3 p.m. that same day. So lots of information, lots of great webinars coming up. So we will be posting all of that information in the chat if you want to register to join us, and we hope to see you. And joining you now is Jenny Atkinson with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, and thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you so much, Sierra. And I'm really happy to welcome all of you to today's Crucible of Practice Salon, Accelerating What Works in Rural Communities. It's wonderful to see so many people introducing themselves in the chat, and I already see a number of rockstar rural communities that I recognize who've joined us today. So as Sierra mentioned, we're really hoping that you will all participate in the conversation by letting us know about your experience in the chat, commenting when you hear things that resonate with your work, and then, of course, posting any questions that you hope the panel will address. The Campaign for Grade Level Reading has organizations in many of the states that serve as state leads for the grade level reading work. They come together regularly and share what they're doing and learning. A while back, one of our leads, Thorne, and I'm getting ahead of myself here a little bit, I'll introduce her in a minute. She approached us, encouraging us to spend some time with leads talking about the work happening in rural communities. She wanted to share what they were doing in Oregon and learn more about what was happening in other states. As a group of leads started talking, we soon realized that it would be really helpful to have a broader conversation about what we were hearing. One of the things we heard over and over again was, when you know one rural community, you know one rural community. In other words, although there may be some commonalities in the rural experience, recognizing the strengths and needs of rural communities, recognizing that the strengths and needs of rural communities are varied is also an important piece of the puzzle. we're also hearing so much about the ways that state and local partnerships were bolstering and accelerating the work in rural communities. And so felt that sharing these examples and strategies would be really helpful. So we're very excited to have this conversation today and look forward to hearing from local and state leaders in 3 states, Arizona, Mississippi, and Oregon. We will hear from Michele Connelly, the Executive Director of the United Way of West Central Mississippi. In addition to her work at the United Way, Michele is also involved with a range of local and state efforts, including the Vicksburg-Warren Excel by 5 Coalition Lead, Vicksburg-Warren Campaign for Grade Level Reading Campaign Lead, and a member of the Mississippi State Early Childhood Advisory Council. Alissa Hobart is the director of the Mississippi Campaign for Grade Level Reading, the state lead organization Mississippi, which is based at the Center for Excellence in Literacy Instruction at the University of Mississippi. And prior to this role, Alissa was an elementary school teacher and served as a literacy coach with the Mississippi Department of Education. Erin Helgren is the remote rural coach with Children's Institute in Oregon. Erin brings nearly 25 years of experience and knowledge working with young children and families in a variety of contexts, including early learning, social work, and most recently, the public education system. Thorne Ladd is the Chief Executive Officer, also at Children's Institute, the state lead organization in Oregon. Previously, Thorne Ladd was the co-founder and executive director of Kairos PDX, a culturally specific organization dedicated to eliminating educational opportunity and achievement gaps for historically underserved children. Through that work and as a visionary leader in multiple capacities in the region, Thorne Ladd has a long track record of working to transform early learning and healthy development for children and families in Oregon. Lori Masseur is the director of early learning with Read On Arizona, the state lead organization there, where she guides their collaborative work on several strategic priorities related to improving school readiness, early literacy, and system building efforts in the state, including data integration, expanding effective literacy practices, and building educator capacity for early learning professionals. Jerry Stabley is the chair of the advisory committee at AARP Experience Court at Chief Pinal in Arizona. In 2014, Jerry retired as the Community Development Director of Pinal County. This position capped off a 30-year career that included 11 years in Pinal and 19 years with the city of Scottsdale, but that wasn't enough for him. He came back as a volunteer, and you'll be hearing about a lot of the amazing efforts that he's involved with coming up soon. And finally, circling back to the Oregon team, we have Sarah Ruiz-Weight, who has been a resident of the Yoncalla community for nearly 14 years and is a parent leader and second grade teacher at Yoncalla Elementary School. So as you can see, we have some amazing people here to speak with us, and we're thrilled to have them all presenting. You can read more about them in the bio doc that I'll post in the chat momentarily. So I'd like to first turn things over to Thorne Ladd. She's going to talk broadly about working in rural communities and introduce us to some of the work happening in Oregon. Kali?
Thank you. Good afternoon to all of you on the East Coast, and good morning to my fellow West Coast residents and everyone who is in between. It is such a pleasure to be with all of you today. And I have to say, I'm excited about this critical conversation about how we transform outcomes for children and families who reside in rural communities. I guess next slide. Next slide. I wanted to start with this quote because it exemplifies a concept that I really hold dear, and it's a concept that is South African called Ubuntu, which means I am who I am because of who we all are. My humanity is tied up in yours. And I think we're at a time in history that it's really important to remember this, that we are all neighbors, even when we reside in different communities. And as such, my pain is your pain, my success is your success. I think we need to reject some of the false narratives that reduce things to a zero-sum game, because that's not the way it needs to be. And part of my hope for today is that we see that investing in our rural communities and rural children is as important as investing in our urban ones. Next slide. So I wanted to start, if you know a rural community, you know one rural community. That is true. And yet I do think that there are some unique assets that rural communities have. And so I just wanted to highlight some of them. And this is what Children's Institute has found in the communities that we serve in Oregon. And I imagine some of you have found some of these same things. One is that there are strong social networks within rural communities. Often there are tight-knit relationships and a strong sense of mutual support, which can be leveraged for volunteerism, mentorship, and a lot of community-based programming. Another is cultural traditions and values. Many rural areas have rich cultural heritages that emphasize family and resilience and self-reliance, and these values align really well with early childhood education goals. There are also many institutions such as churches and other faith-based spaces that are trusted community hubs that offer outreach, parenting programs, and often childcare services. And so these are really important to the nucleus of the community. And again, I know that there is uniqueness with each community, but I want to emphasize that these are some of the assets that we have found to be there. There are a number of institutional and infrastructure assets within the educational ecosystems that we found in rural communities as well. The most obvious is schools as anchors. Rural schools serve as central community institutions, and they can be expanded to offer many things, early learning, health screenings, family support services. There are also libraries and community centers that can be anchors. And these are places where there could be parenting workshops or play groups, or things that engage families when formal childcare is more limited. We have been fortunate to also have a local health clinic, and rural health providers can integrate developmental screenings and parenting education into routine care. And this is not something that all rural communities have, but we have seen how transformative it has been to have access to this. And then finally, there are a number of natural resources that can be used for place-based learning experiences. Many of our rural communities are truly have beautiful natural spaces. And so we can connect children to learning in the environment and heritage all at once. The fourth asset is local champions and leaders that I think is really important because they are abundant in rural communities, whether it is teachers, healthcare workers, civic leaders. Because there is deep community trust, they can be such powerful advocates for children and for early childhood and in our learnings and experiences. They're really critical to engage, especially families. Families are first teachers, and so they understand and know their children. So we have found that engaging families in the design of programs ensures they are culturally relevant and responsive to the local needs of the community. And we really believe that parents bring wisdom and are excited usually to partner with schools to do this. So I wanted to start with the assets that we see because there are clearly assets in rural communities, but there are also real barriers. And I will say over the course of my career in education, that spanned almost 3 decades now, which is wild, I've heard many people talk about the importance of investing in those furthest from opportunity. We talk about helping those who have the greatest barriers for success. But I have found that our actions and investments don't always follow this logic. And as a former teacher and someone who has spent my career both in policy and practice, I'm a believer in data-driven decisions. And I think all of my fellow panelists, care deeply about children and their well-being. And so when I look at the numbers around children in poverty, and I look at the investments that we're making, there is a moral question as to whether or not we're investing enough and caring enough about our rural communities because there is a disproportionate economic insecurity there. Next slide. So the USDA Economic Research and Census Bureau tell us that rural areas consistently demonstrate higher poverty rates than urban and metro areas. In 2023, the non-metro poverty rate was 15.4% compared to 11.9% in metro regions. Persistent poverty counties and persistent poverty counties or counties where poverty has exceeded 20% for over 30 years. Those poverty counties are disproportionately rural. Over 85% of persistent poverty counties are located in non-metro areas. And of the over 300 persistent poverty counties in the United States, more than 250 of them are classified as rural. And I just thought this slide and this bar graph just gives you a glimpse of what I'm talking about. So you see, when you look at where poverty is, and then you look at where philanthropic investment is, we don't see equity there. We don't see the investments matching the needs. Next slide. So, this is the fact of the matter. Without targeted investments, rural children face deep systemic disadvantages that can persist throughout their lives. And I think it calls upon all of us to ask ourselves this moral question of what do we stand for as a nation, and how can we ensure that zip code does not determine the destiny of a child? And it has for far too many children in our country. So I wanted to start by talking about the assets, because when we build upon existing community assets and invest knowing that these assets can yield better outcomes for children, we have found that the possibilities are endless. So the treat that I think you are in for today is hearing the stories of how investments were catalytic to change that yielded tangible results for children and families in our rural communities. And I believe that this is how transformation happens. And I think that hope builds from there. And so when you have hope, you can be unstoppable. So I want you to get ready to hear the story of Yoncalla, which is a special place to me. I've had the privilege of going to Yoncalla many times, but I was not at Children's Institute when this project started. I was able to see the impact of the work there by the family and the community and the organizations that invested their time and resource. I'm going to hand it over to Erin Helgren, who will share that story along with one of our educators. And I hope you remember where I started, which is there are so many assets within rural communities, and we are all interconnected. And so my hope is that the stories you hear about Yoncalla, that you can learn from and figure out if there are ways that they can be beneficial to your community as well. Erin?
Thank you so much, Kali. Next slide, please. So my name is Erin Helgren, and I have had the honor and privilege of walking alongside the Yoncalla community and school district as they have transformed their community into a vibrant early learning ecosystem for every student and every child in Yoncalla. I'm going to share a little bit about the project, and then I'm going to turn it over to just an amazing teacher and parent leader from Yoncalla named Sarah Ruiz-Weight. Next slide. Yoncalla is a small community located in the Cascade Mountain Range in Oregon. It is a community that has been historically impacted by the declining timber industry, which has in turn impacted funding for their school district. I would say, 70 to 80% of our families have been impacted by this declining timber industry, and slowly, prior to our Early Works project, access to medical, dental, behavioral health services was nearly 35 miles away. Yoncalla is also a community that has strong social capital. They have a resiliency and grit. They have generational traditions that include ranching and forestry, and they have a really strong commitment to every child that lives in their community. Prior to this call, Sarah and I were talking about the safety and the sense of community and the sense of connectedness between families and children. I would say that Yoncalla has a willingness to step up and do hard work, and a willingness to be forgiving when relationship repair needs to happen. Next slide, please. Yoncalla Early Works is a project that has been in the district for nearly a decade and a half. I always like to share the beginnings of the Yoncalla Early Works project because it really exemplifies the social networks and relational importance to meaningful work. Nearly 13 years ago, Christy Cox from the Ford Family Foundation and Jerry Fossey, the principal of the Yoncalla Elementary School, were neighbors just by chance. And they were sharing tomatoes one August afternoon when Jerry shared the lack of opportunity for children to engage prior to kindergarten. And what he shared with Christy was that we have children that are coming in that on the first day of kindergarten already feel like they are lacking skills, and they need support, and that in his words, they were already behind. And this led to a commitment from the Ford Family Foundation for nearly 12 years in this community to build a strong network of early learning support and to build an understanding of what it took for rural communities to be able to serve every student. This started with some data collection and really focusing on building relationships in a community. What Ford Family believed and Children's Institute believed is that if you could support and engage parents, use them as resources, bring community partners together, that we could build a strong and vibrant community for an early learning system for children. Some of our most I would say transformational accomplishments have been creating a preschool where every child in Yoncalla has the opportunity to 2 years of high quality early learning experience for no charge, and then also working together with our local health partners to reopen a healthcare clinic that was responsive to the wants and needs of the community. Next slide, please. Yoncalla Early Works is really grounded on guiding principles that has been instrumental in leading the project, including a universally available. We believe that every student in the community had a right to high quality early learning programming, that we knew that we needed to bring together community leaders, that it needed to be a smart investment, that it could only happen with engaged and empowered families, include all families engaged and empowered, that we really wanted to be outcome focused and data driven, that it was connected to the community and to the school, and that we had common goals. Next slide, please. Our key lessons that we learned was that in order to do transformational work, it was imperative that we built relationships. So in the very beginnings of early works, I would say that there was mistrust amongst the community, and there was a lack of connection between the school district and parents. And so what we did is we invited parents in, we built relationships with families using, really leveraging relationships with strong community partners. And we had numerous conversations in a model where everyone's voice was elevated. Some of our success were just really listening to the community, creating opportunities for community-led, resident-led activities, and then we were able to increase the intensity of efforts. Next slide. One of our, I would say one of our biggest accomplishments was really leveraging the power of community members. And I'm excited to introduce you to Sierra Ruiz-Weight, who I've known for nearly a decade now, and have her share her journey of a parent leader up to becoming a teacher in our school building.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Ruiz-Weight, and like Erin said, I've been in this community for many, many years. I first started out in this community as a parent with 3 young children, and my husband worked in a mill. I wasn't very engaged in the community because I didn't know anyone, and so I came to the elementary school to try and be a parent volunteer, and at that time, it wasn't what the school had in mind. And I continued pushing and I continued being engaged as much as I could. And unfortunately, hard times kind of forced us to move away for some time. And we realized later on that we needed to come back. We needed to be in this community because that's where our heart was. So when I came back, I went to work at the mill with my husband. And I was there for a couple of years until I broke my leg. And that really changed everything. After I broke my leg, Erin started coming to me, and my daughter started preschool. My 5th child started preschool, and I watched the light happen in her eyes. And it was the most beautiful thing. I knew right then and there that I needed to be a part of what was happening in this building and in this community. And so when Erin came to me and was like, I need you to be part of this. I want you to come join. I want you to do parenting. I took it all in and I went full force, both feet, no questions asked. And I did it all. And anything that she asked me to do, whether it was going to Portland to speak to administrators up there or going to conferences or anything she asked, I had full trust in that she was guiding me in the right direction. I was known as the throat punch parent. It's kind of a funny joke now. It gets brought up at the trainings. But I was that parent that thought that my voice needed to be loud in order to be heard. And because I come from a biracial family, my investments were my children's safety and that my children felt like they belonged in a majority of white community. And so I made sure that people knew who I was and where I was coming from and what our family values were. And it didn't get me anywhere. And it wasn't until I learned how to be safe with Erin and face the generational trauma that brought me to where I was. It started to teach me how to use my voice in a more compassionate and empathetic way towards others and understanding that not everyone's going to value what I value, but I can still be heard and I can still add to it. And so with that, I realized that I had more to offer to this community than just being a parent. So I started working here at the school and I started out in the preschool as an instructional assistant to the preschool teacher, Megan Barber, who's absolutely amazing. And she taught me so many different things and how to become the person that I wanted to be, all while working with children. And I got to learn so many different things. And as I started to learn and as I started to grow, I started to have more drive for how can I engage this community even more? How can I advocate to parents to bring them in? How can I advocate to children to bring them in and want them to volunteer? So I started with my own kids. And I got my own kids engaged in sports activities, and I worked with another aide in the community to help build a sports program. And we helped get funding through the school to build that program, which is now amazing. And with all of that, I went back to school to become a teacher. And I knew from my childhood that was something that I always wanted to do. But because I grew up in a rural community also, and I lacked skills from having childhood trauma, I didn't know how to do that. And I had no idea how to even get on the path to becoming a teacher. And it wasn't until I met Erin and worked at this school that I even had a glimpse of that could be me. And I had this like almost epiphany of I don't have to live in this form, in this way that that the society made me feel. And so I went back to school. I did online school because being a family in a rural community, you don't have transportation always. You don't have people you can rely on to, feel safe with your kids. And so I decided to go online and now I'm working as a teacher here in Yoncalla, which is like my dream. Along with that, I also have a daughter who is 21 today, and she works in our preschool. And I also have a 17-year-old daughter who's going into her senior year who has hopes to become a middle school teacher here at Yoncalla. So not only have I worked my hardest to help build the community and help kids feel safe and help kids feel heard, but I'm also learning that I get to help be the person that builds a future and opening those doors for my own children and letting them see that beautiful bright light that our daughter showed us. So that is my story.
Sorry, I was on mute, of course. Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's just a beautiful journey and example of your resilience and the way you were able to work with the community to really strengthen you as well as the community itself. Couldn't think of a better example of what we're hoping to see in this work. So thank you so much for being with us. And we'll be hearing from Sarah, Erin, and Kali later, but thank you, Erin, as well, for letting us know about the work in Yoncalla, and Kali for your really impassioned rally to this work. We're going to turn now from Oregon to Mississippi, and we will hear from Alissa Hobart and Michele Connelly. I would love to turn it over so we can hear a little bit about what's happening in Mississippi and in Warren County. Alissa.
Thanks, Jenny. And so great to hear from the Yoncalla team. Really hard to follow up Sarah, but we'll do our best here. So hello, everyone. My name is Alissa Hobart, and I serve as the director of the Mississippi Campaign for Grade Level Reading. I'm really glad to be here today and for us to have a chance to really focus and hear from rural communities about what they're actually doing and what's working, and really just highlight the incredible promise that's awaiting us in our rural communities. So just to put some context, to provide some context for everyone, more than half of Mississippi's population lives in rural areas. So rural areas is really kind of just our main way of working here in Mississippi. And so I think that's important for all of us to understand. And there's lots of different definitions of rural, and it looks drastically different across our states amongst rural communities. Like Kali said, if you know one rural community, you know one. And I think that's absolutely true everywhere. But like I said, they're full of opportunity and promise. So I agree with what Yoncalla said. One of the biggest things, the most valuable things in our work with rural communities here is the relationships. Nothing happens without relationships. And so our work is very relational, and there's a tremendous amount of pride, knowledge, and ownership in rural communities that I think is a tremendous asset. So in my role, I support our Campaign for Grade Level Reading communities throughout the state. And what I've seen since most of them are rural, I've seen an incredible amount of progress that's rooted in their relationships. It's rooted in trust that I build between myself and our community leads, and then they build on that within their communities, and also just a lot of mutual respect. What they're doing is working. They know their communities, and really working to build true partnership. So that took time. It takes being present physically. In Mississippi, we are pro in person. So even though we're on Zoom today, in Mississippi, we do as much in person as we can. I feel like it's when you build the most trust. There's just something that happens with the screen. If you're actually trying to do this work, you need to be there. And so being present and taking the time to get to know not just your community lead, but who are their partners? How do they work together? Taking that time to say, show me, I want to meet your people. I want to see what you're doing. Show me. And so Michele will kind of shed some light on that too. And here in our center, what we do to support our communities are we find resources, opportunities, initiatives, programs, grants that really support improving literacy, and especially in our CGLR communities. So I can come to them and say, here are some opportunities, here are some resources. And they also come back to me to say, hey, Alissa, we need help with this. Can you find somebody or something that might help us with X? And so we have that back and forth, which also I think, again, just builds the relationships, builds opportunities for increased collaboration, and to make sure that that partnership is actually working. And then the other thing that I think our communities particularly value is the chance to actually hear and connect with one another. Because it's not about me, it's not about the state level campaign, it's about the communities and the families and children they're serving. And that is center to everything we do. So making sure they have the opportunity to connect with one another, including other people across the state, other organizations, very, very collaborative. And so sometimes that means, hey, I saw you did something with attendance. How did you get that going? Who in your community helped you get that going? And having conversations about truly just sharing what worked, what didn't work, what are your challenges, and thinking about how you might need to tweak that for your own community. So I'm going to kind of pass it off to Michele at this point, because I think that's the most important piece, is actually hearing from the communities in their own words, from their own experience about what's working. So Michele is an incredible representative of the community perspective here within Mississippi. And so she is going to share a little bit about how this looks and feels on the ground in Vicksburg. So Michele?
Thank you, Alissa. And before I begin, I think I would be remiss without telling everyone that I think I have the best state lead that there is in the nation. When she says she truly takes time to really understand, know her community, she really does. She is here all of the time. If there is a campaign for grade level reading event, she is going to do all she can to be present. We talk to each other all of the time. She knows Warren County, and she doesn't know it via Zoom. She doesn't know it via data. She knows it because she has been here and she has met the people, and the people are who make up a rural community. She has been here to meet the people and know what our strengths are and know what our needs are. And I greatly appreciate that, because I know it's not easy, because even though I feel like I'm her only community, I know she has other communities that she does the same for. And I think it's important, before I begin talking about Warren County, I really need to tell you about who we are. We're located in Mississippi, obviously. We're located right on the Mississippi River. We cover about 619 square miles, and that may sound big, but let me give you a little context. It takes me 20 minutes every day to get to work, and that is not odd. But there's absolutely no traffic on the way there. It is true 20 minutes of driving. In fact, if there are more than 3 cars at a stoplight, we think that we've got a traffic jam in Vicksburg, Mississippi. And I'm not even sure that I've ever really been stopped at the same light twice, except for maybe on the day that we host our Christmas parade. We have about 41,000 people that call Warren County home. They all live in about 16,800 households. Now, here's where the picture becomes a little bit more complex. About 20% of these households fall below the poverty line, and another 27% are above that federal poverty line, but they still cannot make ends meet, according to ALICE, Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed data. So that means 47% of our community is struggling just to survive. Our racial makeup is about equal. We have 47% white, 48% Black, with a small percentage of Hispanics, Asians, and multiracial residents. We are a diverse community, but we do have significant challenges. So public transportation, I think everybody that has already spoken and will speak from a rural community will say that public transportation is always a challenge. Limited public transportation is only putting it kindly. I remember when a representative from the Wallace Foundation called me and said, "Oh, I'll just catch an Uber when I get there." And I just laughed. And then I didn't mean to laugh, but I did, because there's no vibrant Uber scene here in Warren County. But there is a lot of heart and a lot of hustle and a deep commitment to collaboration. So somebody from my church met her at the airport, picked her up, and brought her to Vicksburg, Mississippi. The airport is 45 minutes away. You see, in Warren County, we believe in partnerships. And when I say partnerships, I mean real partnerships. That belief is what has led us to one of our prized possessions, which is called the Vicksburg Warren Youth Development Center. It's a shining example of what's possible when everyone is pulling in the same direction. Our city provides the building and the staff. The county provides the executive director. The school district shares the data, and the United Way helps fund it through grants and donations. This center exists because we share a common goal to reduce youth violence by wrapping coordinated services around the children and their families. And these children are referred to the Youth Development Center by family court, by the school district, by a police department, by our sheriff's department, and also through self-referrals. But most importantly, we think it's extremely important to truly listen to the people that we serve. Just recently, I spent 3 hours with 21 local youth asking them directly, what do you need? If youth opportunity is important, what do you need? What would strengthen the opportunities for you here in this community? And they told us, and they were very honest. And we need to take that information that they shared to build upon what we are going to do to wrap services around those children. You see, we constantly are responsible for receiving feedback from our parents, from the children, through surveys, interviews, focus group meetings, because the feedback will continue to help us guide us in the work that we do. It helps guide us, but it also helps create that sense of ownership over the work that we are doing. This is not something that the Campaign for Grade Level Reading is doing and the United Way is doing all by ourselves. It's what our community as a whole is doing. So how have we been able to move the needle? So let me tell you, one of the most critical pieces in our journey has been the Community Solutions Action Plan, the CSAP, which if you are a Campaign for Grade Level Reading community, you are very aware of what the CSAP is and the many hours it takes in order to get that together. But I encourage you to take pride in creating your CSAP because it is celebrating your community. It's determining what your gaps are, but it's also providing you the direction that you need to take, the direction that your community as a whole has taken ownership over. The plan, it gave us direction. And I'm telling you, do not be afraid of starting small because everybody thinks that everything that they need to do needs to be grandiose and big in order to be seen by other people. And it does not. I very much so remember our first Campaign for Grade Level Reading event that took place here in Warren County. It was simply a book swap. Not a book swap with new books, a book swap with donated used books where the children came, chose a book, and we begged them to come back so that they could return the book so that other children would have the same opportunity. But it uplifted the spirit of our community and it created a buzz about literacy. And today, I am proud to tell you that last year alone, we distributed over 47,000 brand new books to our community through the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, and reading is fundamental because we have been able to grow thanks to the support of our amazing local partners. And we've now implemented a literacy intervention program because just distributing the books was not doing what it needed to do to help build strong readers in our community. This past academic school year, we had 300 struggling readers who on average gained 13.5 months worth of growth according to their iReady scores. And we do this by partnering with other agencies and partnering with individuals in our community who are dedicated to ensuring that we fill that gap. We've also leaned on our state networks. Oh my goodness, I lean on Alissa all the time. I have her cell phone number in my phone. We talk to each other. I share all of the wonderful things that happen, but I also, she is my sounding board for sure. She is able to arrange training, resources, networking, connections, all of the time. One recent example that I'm very proud of is that Warren County was chosen as a pilot program for what we call Parent Academy. Parent Academy was developed by the Barksdale Reading Institute and now offered by Sealy at the University of Mississippi. It was a free 6-session course designed to help caregivers get their young children ready for kindergarten. It covers everything from physical and emotional development to early reading and math skills. The parents are the primary educators, and this program lifted that up and allowed them to feel empowered to do what they needed to do to ensure that their children were ready to be successful and to thrive in kindergarten, which we all know has a great impact on being able to thrive throughout your elementary and high school career. But before I close, I wanted to leave you with this. As a small community, don't ever be intimidated by big names or large foundations. Warren County, we do not have a major university in our community. So data is not easy to come by. Research is not easy to come by. We do not have Fortune 500 companies who are willing to write that ridiculously large check to the work that we do here in Warren County. We don't have a lot of financial resources here in Warren County. And honestly, if you remember at the beginning, we don't even have a reliable Uber system to transport people around our very large county. But what we do have is passion. We have hard work, and most of all, we have each other. And I think that's extremely important for rural communities to understand. It is each other that lifts us to where we want to be and where we need to be to thrive. And because of that, Warren County has been honored as a Culture of Health Prize from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And we've also received the Advancing Adolescents Opportunities Award from the Wallace Foundation. Two very large foundations that this small little Warren County was recognized by, not because of the major donors and the major universities that are located in our community, but because of people like me and you who just want to do right for our children. So no matter how small your community is, remember the most important part is your big heart and the big hearts of those who surround you that want to do the work for the betterment of the children in your community.
Thank you, Alissa, and thank you, Michele. Every time I talk to you, Michele, I learn more about the amazing work, and I'm always inspired by you. So really appreciate what you had to say and look forward to hearing a little more later on. We're going to turn now to Arizona, where we're going to hear from Lori and Jerry about the work happening there.
Thank you, Jenny. I'll go ahead and kick it off, and it's certainly hard to follow Michele. Michele, your comedic timing is spot on, and it's hard to follow the best state lead, Alissa, there in Mississippi. But I will certainly do my best in order to sort of set the stage and provide some context before turning it over to Jerry to really begin to talk about the work that's happening in his particular rural community. But to set the stage, Read On Arizona not only serves as the state lead for the campaign for grade level reading, but it also serves as our state's early initiative and was actually initially launched in 2013 to address what was termed at the time as our state's early literacy crisis. And partners in Read On Arizona, which includes our Department of Ed, our State Board of Ed, our Birth to Five agency, Head Start, the governor's office, different philanthropic organizations, are really committed to improving language and literacy outcomes across the birth through the third grade continuum with a very strategic focus on what happens in the early years and the early grades. And it's very much to what Alissa talked about earlier. It's very much about this collaborative and collective approach that has to happen. We cannot move the needle unless we have everybody in the same boat rowing in the same direction and really having this Northern Star. And so for us in Arizona, this collaborative approach really includes 4 shared priorities that our partners in Read On Arizona identified as really being paramount to our collective efforts to accelerate early literacy and third grade reading outcomes. And so those key drivers include really having a strategic focus on how are we building educator capacity in the science of reading. What you're going to hear Jerry talk about is scaling up evidence-based literacy solutions that we know work. We know that if we're going to see progress with early literacy, it really requires us to use and implement proven strategies to support a child's literacy development. Engaging families and communities, which you heard others speak about. We know that ensuring that families and community partners have the resources that they need to support children at home in those out of school time settings. And then last but certainly not least, going back to a little bit to Oregon, expanding access to quality early learning. We know that quality early learning programs support early language and literacy development and better prepare children for success in kindergarten and beyond. And so those 4 shared priorities that partners identified, those same key drivers and shared priorities are also applied at the local levels. So we have Read On Arizona that serves at the statewide level, and then we have a network of over 20 Read On communities. And each of those local Read On communities consist of an array of stakeholders from local governments to school district leadership to the libraries. And they really are using their community data and information to determine their goals and their priorities that are aligned to those key drivers. But they're doing it in such a way that's unique to their particular community for the children and the families that they serve. And so one example of that is Read On Casa Grande, which was established through the city of Casa Grande in 2021 with partners such as the city council and the mayor, Casa Grande Elementary School District, and AARP Foundation, and Achieve Pinal. And so these partners came together and identified strategies, initiatives, and activities that they would be undertaking as a key contribution to advancing one or more of the shared priorities. And so for Achieve Pinal, which serves as one of the leads of Read on Casa Grande, they really are making some what I would consider to be very impressive strides in the area of scaling up evidence-based literacy solutions in their particular community through evidence-based high-impact tutoring. And so without further ado, I'm going to go pass it over to Jerry so he can talk about what high-impact tutoring looks like in his particular rural community.
Thank you, Lori. My name is Jerry Stabley, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the United States. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I live in Casa Grande in Pinal County. Pinal County is the county between the county that serves Metro Phoenix is Maricopa County. The county that Tucson is located in is Pima County. So we are in between those two counties, and we are urbanizing. A lot of growth is coming out of both Metro Tucson and Metro Phoenix. In Pinal County, 66% of our third graders are not reading at their grade level. And as you all know, a child who's unable to read at grade level by the end of third grade is 4 times more likely to drop out of high school. And some of the statistics from Arizona, at least, 1 out of 10 of every young man without high school degrees will end up in jail in Arizona. Also in Arizona, our mayors had a roundtable back in 2014, so this is over 10 years ago. They estimated that each dropout will cost the state over $400,000 over his or her lifetime in services and lost tax revenues. So there's a financial impact to having people drop out of high school, and which directly, as you know, correlates with not being able to read by the end of third grade. AARP Achieve Pinal Experience Score, we're part of the AARP program, attacks this problem by utilizing our trained senior volunteers. They provide one-on-one tutoring, and that's not the same in every location, but we provide one-on-one tutoring to improve the reading skills of second and third graders. Lori and Read on Arizona helped us achieve a grant now almost 2 years ago, and which allowed us to serve 9 school districts in Pinal County. Pinal County is roughly comparable in geographic size to the state of Connecticut, a little bit smaller. And these 9 districts make over 1/2 of the area of the county and serve almost 70% of the public elementary school population in Pinal County. We have tutored over 1,000 Pinal County students over the past 5 years. And the program is proven to be very, very effective. In the last year that we have data for, which is 23-24, 83 of our students progressed an entire grade level, and 38% of our students improved 2 or more levels in their reading. 2 or more levels, meaning 2 grade levels in their reading. So much of the success that we've experienced comes from the confidence that is instilled in the students by having an adult, in this case a senior adult, paying attention to the student, showing the student that they matter to somebody outside of their family, and giving them the confidence that they can learn to read. I had a student that went from 6 words per minute to 75 words per minute. Your results may vary, but she was extremely bright, but just needed to cross that threshold. And once she crossed that threshold, she was just taking off. Our tutoring sessions are 30 minutes each, and I'm a volunteer, by the way, in the work I do with the program overall and as a tutor. Our tutoring sessions are 30 minutes each, and we meet with them twice a week. And most of our students we tutor between 6 and 7 months. Sometimes we have children that come into the program. Sometimes we graduate children from the program. If they're reading at their grade level, we'll graduate them and bring in somebody else who's struggling. But typically it's between 6 and 7 months. We conduct our sessions both in person and online. We started off in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic, and we had to do our tutoring online. And what was interesting about that is that the superintendent for the school that we started in one school district here in Casa Grande, she visited with the students when they came back into class. Our tutors were still online. The students were back into class. And what she discovered is the connection that had been made between the tutor and the student was incredible, despite the fact that they never met in person, and they had that strong bond. So we find that both tutoring online and in person have pretty much the same results. There's very, very little difference between the progress that the students make, whether they do it on a computer or whether they do it in person. In this past school year that just ended, we had 111 volunteers, 111. We have a staff person who's just done a bang-up job of finding volunteers, and we were able to tutor 317 students across the county. And our tutors, I mentioned, we do it online. Approximately 1/4 of all of our tutors are online, and they live at locations all across the United States. Many of them come here for the winter and tutor online in the winter, and start off then tutoring in their summer homes. Start off tutoring there, come here for the winter, and then return to their summer homes and finish up online. We are one of 18 affiliates for the AARP Foundation Experience Corps. But what makes our chapter unique is the fact that we are the only one that serves a predominantly rural area. Macon, Georgia has a chapter. They serve Macon, Georgia, which is a relatively large city, and they serve rural areas in addition to Macon, Georgia. And rural areas, as other speakers have mentioned, often experience economic stresses. We are certainly not immune to those stresses. 30% of Pinal County's population is living at or below the 200% federal poverty level. Being in a rural area has provided us with very unique challenges. The programs that are in major cities, we have 4 programs in Arizona, in Tempe, which was the very first. Phoenix and now Mesa all have programs, and so there are 4 programs in the city. The 3 programs, Mesa, Tempe, and Phoenix, have city staff that run the program for them, which is the major expense for running one of these programs, is paying for staff time. Since we have volunteers, we get the books from AARP, and so that provides a huge advantage, and that we don't have here. Our communities are small enough that we do ask them to participate financially, our municipalities and the county. Many do, some do not, some choose not to for philosophical reasons, want to support our program. So and other programs, such as there's a program in Boston. When you look at the donors, the contributors to that program, they have hospitals, they have banks that contribute to that program, and they have Boston Brahmins in general. That provides them with a great advantage. They have 21 employees serving 384 students. As I mentioned, we serve 317 students. We have 3 full-time employees and 6 part-time, and the part-time employees just work during the school year, and they work about 25 hours a week during the school year. Another challenge we face here in the rural community is that there are donors and foundations, both in Pima County, but mostly in Maricopa County. And the ones in Maricopa County, most of them do not want to serve outside of Maricopa County. And so that provides a great challenge for us. Another thing we experience is that a lot of the foundations want to sponsor research. They want to sponsor research. So we have a lot of research in Arizona that shows that we have a problem with reading for our 3rd graders. We have a lot of data about that. But as far as then supporting programs that actually are attacking the program, that's another story. And if anybody has any ideas as to why that is, why research is valued over actual solving the problem, please let me know. I'm totally puzzled by that. After 5 years of working on this program, I'm totally puzzled by it. I mentioned where our funding comes from. Some of our municipalities, the county, Pinal County in the past has supported us. I'm not sure they're going to in the future. We have a Rotary Club in Casa Grande that's been very generous. We do get contributions from businesses and individuals. our Native American communities, and we have a number of them here in Pinal County. They have actually been very generous. They all have casinos, and they all are part of the agreement between them and the state of Arizona was that they were going to set aside some of that money to support causes such as ours, and they are indeed doing that, and they have been a very important source of income for us. We've also in the past received Department of Justice grants, and some were very, very large. And that source is drying up, at least for us. I hope others, not for others, but it certainly is drying up for us. As I mentioned before, Rita in Arizona and Lori in particular helped us get a state grant that was very important and very much appreciated. My last comment to everybody is if you know of any foundations that can help us here in rural Arizona, please let us know, especially if you have connections to them. That would be greatly appreciated. Sometimes, and my hat's off to the folks in Vicksburg to be able to get those grants from those large entities. I've tried to crack that nut with no ability to do so. So any thoughts on how we can get with those large national foundations, again, would be greatly appreciated. And again, thank you for this time, and I hope we provided you with some information about what we're doing here in Arizona.
You definitely did, Jerry. Thanks. And Laura, your comedic timing is right on target too. So appreciate the picture that both of you painted for the work in Arizona and Casa Grande, Pinal County. So I hope everyone has been appreciating as much as I have really the range of terrific perspectives that we have in this conversation, state and local leaders, teachers, parents, volunteers, and I feel like all of our presenters could take an hour and share with us just valuable insights and information about what's going on in their communities. Right now, what we're going to do is turn to a few questions. So as all of the panelists come on together, so we can see each other, I also want to let you know that Kali, who started us off, is on the road. She planned to be with us, but had a restaurant conference come up that she didn't expect. So she's still with us. But if she speaks, you'll just hear her voice. You won't see her face as she's driving. So to kick us off with a first question, I wanted to ask everybody about when you reflect on the work that you're doing together, and we've heard a little bit about this, state and community leads, what are things you think work best to help move the work? And, what would your headline be, or the most important lessons learned that you have for working together as community and state teams?
I guess I can kick off a little bit, and I think this has been a common thread that I've heard from Oregon and Mississippi, and especially in some of the ways that Oregon kicked us off, is the common thread is really about how are we intentionally aligning services in a purposeful way that will accelerate early learning and literacy outcomes. And going back to, Alyssa's piece about relationships, and trust, things move at the speed of trust, and making sure that you're, embedded in that community, and that you're looked at as a trusted individual, and that you're working alongside them. What happens at the state level and how it rolls down to the local level oftentimes looks very different when it comes to implementation, and making sure that we're honoring the unique needs of not just rural communities, but any community, and looking at that data and saying, what does that data say? And then hearing from community members about what they need, and then working alongside them to really thinking about how we're intentionally aligning those services, again, in a very purposeful and a meaningful way in order to move the needle. You heard Jerry talk about, the work with the high impact tutoring and the model that they're using. That's a hybrid model, with online and in person. That doesn't necessarily work for every community, but they've seen great success in using that particular model. And I think if that's the headline, it's about intentionality and being purposeful.
Thanks, Lori. Other thoughts?
So I just want to add, because Michele said earlier that, you know, in her community, they're hardworking and they're all in, you know, they're full of grit. And I feel like that's the biggest part of getting people to engage and be part of all of these beautiful works, is that you have to seek out people within your community. And some of those people don't fit that mold. They don't look like educators. They don't look like business partners. They don't look like any kind of, you know, special community leader in any way. They're just a downright earthy person that's trying to skate along in the world and do their day to day. And I feel like that's kind of what Erin has done in our community, is that, you know, she didn't look for that typical parent. She didn't look for that, oh, who's gonna be willing to give their time and who's gonna be willing to come in here and have a voice. You know, she looked for people that were like, nope, no, not me. Don't look at me, you know. And I feel like that's what is kind of our headline here, is, you know, doing the impossible and seeking out those impossible people and being one of those people. I just have to say that when you're looking to engage your community, you're not looking for community members. You're looking for the people outside of that box, because those are the ones that are going to support that program with their whole heart. And they are going to stick with you through the thick, through the thin, through the wobbly, and the other ones will kind of weed themselves out. And then you will have this really amazing set team of people that you can always rely on, you can always trust, and you can always believe that their best interest is the work that you're doing.
So just adding to what Sarah shared, I think that the things that for us that helped us move the work forward is just really creating an environment of connection, safety, and purpose, and seeking out, I call them non-traditional leaders, those non-traditional leaders that are truly representative of the community, because they know the community intimately and will support you in understanding what the barriers are for participation. I jokingly say oftentimes in an administrative meeting in Yoncalla, our tagline would be Yoncalla, we learn from our mistakes. But I think there's some beauty in that, because what that means is that we're willing to be innovative and take risks, and then also be reflective and be willing to change where things need to change, because we know that like great work is often fluid and innovative and needs to be responsive to your community. And so I think our most important lesson learned was really embedding intentional time around relationship building and being meaningfully engaged in your community, because that's where the work starts. And once you have a strong foundation, you are really able to lead a community in an innovative direction that meets the needs of all children.
I think I would add, can you hear me okay?
Yep. Thanks, Khalid.
From a state lead perspective, I think it was said earlier, things move at the speed of trust. And I think trust is really important. But I also would say, you know, many states, we have many communities in our state, and the urban-rural divide is real. I think it's easy for, if state leads are based in urban areas, to make assumptions or lean into things that just aren't true about rural communities. I think you have to put all assumptions aside, go in with an intentionality around trust. And I think that's how the magic happens. And that is something that I have learned as someone who doesn't reside in a rural community, but has spent time. I just had to put all assumptions aside and go trust good intention and trust the people in community as experts of their community.
Yeah, I echo the trust. Again, I think that's just essential here for states and state leads to build across their networks more at the state level, and then also with their communities. Again, it goes on all levels. And I also, something I think that helps is when we're actually elevating the stories of our rural communities. Making sure that there's that chance to celebrate what's working too. Because sometimes getting that attention out there, even just amongst your own state or even within your own community, making sure that that narrative of here's what we're doing, we're working really hard on this, here's what's working, here's what we know we still need to be better at, like that, making sure we're actually sharing those stories is really important. I know Michele and I talk about it a lot too, but even within Mississippi, with some of the literacy success here within Mississippi, there are still a lot of people who don't know, or even within your own community who don't know the great things that you are doing. So really with that trusting relationship and using your ability to, when people ask, I try to share specific community level examples of great things that are happening here in our community, here in Mississippi, and building those connections too.
And for me, as a community, sometimes we don't have available to us the same things that a statewide organization would have. The strong connections with the Mississippi Department of Education. Alissa has those connections. So if there is something that a community needs, or that the Mississippi Department of Education needs from a community, Alissa is able to make those connections. If there is a pilot program that a university would like to try in a community, Alissa can make those connections. But Alissa doesn't say, this is what you have to do. Alissa provides a cafeteria style email at least once a month that says, these are all of the things that I have been approached with. What would anyone like to participate in? And then we have the opportunity to say yes or no to that. And if we say no, Alissa, we're not off Alissa's radar, because Alissa understands that we are busy in a multitude of other directions also. But she trusts us enough for us to choose also, what do we think will work in our community? And it's her connections that I may not have that has made us stronger, because then that allows us to build connections also.
Thank you, everybody, for helping to tease out and illuminate more how those partnerships work together. And before I go to my next question, I have a lot of questions, and I can go all the way up to 2 o'clock. So if anyone else has questions, I see one in there, and we will get to your question, although I see one person has also answered. But please post your questions in the Q&A, because we will set aside time for you if you do. And if you don't, we'll just keep going with our questions here. So next question I have for the group is around structural barriers. I would love to hear if there are ways that, specifics about ways you have worked to address structural barriers, whether they're what we've heard about transportation barriers, or others that you found that may be, more specific to rural challenges.
I just want to hop in and say, one of the things that we had here in Yoncalla was that was a major barrier for us was medical access. Like, we didn't have access to medical care, and a lot of the families that are in this community, there's multiple siblings within the school, and so if you had to go to the doctor, like with me, 5 children, if my kid had to go to the doctor, I made 5 appointments for one day, and I spent the entire day in town with my kids, meaning they missed school. And because I didn't have a person who lived in the community to rely on to be able to get my children from school, to leave the others behind, my kids ended up being absent. And so that was one of the things that when Erin started introducing, building community cafes and wanting to bring healthcare into our community, I was all for, because that was one of the biggest things. We have elderly people who don't have transportation or can't get to their doctor's appointments. We have a lot of men out here who's their sole, responsibility for finances in their household. They can't afford to take an entire day off of work and haul their family all the way up to, 60 miles away. And so having just a doctor's office that's 6 miles from our town, and being able to set up sports physicals for our children, and being able to, like, if there was a kid at school that was sick, the parent could just run them quickly to the clinic and then come straight back. They're not missing an entire day of school in order to go to the doctor. So that was one of the biggest barriers for us, was not only was it that transportation piece, but it was also having access to medical care close by enough that we can have consistently healthy children. So that was our big one.
Thank you, Sarah.
I think sometimes, and I'm glad you said that, Sarah, and the reason I am is no one would have never, ever even remotely known that unless somebody was truly listening and trusting the community as a whole. And I think to overcome some of the barriers, we have to stop assuming what those barriers are and dig in and truly find out what the true barriers are. And then be unique in the way we approach that, and think outside of the box, and to have those champions in your community who are willing to think outside of the box and approach that particular challenge. Because without listening to Sarah, you would have a group of, as Sarah said, community leaders around the table saying transportation's an issue. But then what is it that transportation is preventing you to do, and how can we think outside of the box to bring it to the community rather than just continually saying, I've been at United Way for 11 years, and for 11 years, every roundtable I have, what is the challenge? Transportation. But then everybody leaves the meeting and gets in their brand new nice little cars and drives off to their agencies. And I just want to say, why don't you drive two people rather than, I mean, we can solve this. And I think what it really takes is communication, listening, and again, back to trust. If we're working with the community, trust to know what they consider to be the challenges so that we can then in return make them a part of the solution.
Michele, building on thank you. You said that beautifully, and building on what you said, for us in Yoncalla, it's been really encouraging the school district and people that have historically been the leaders in the community to rethink their leadership team, and to recognize that part of that leadership team needs to be people with lived experience in the community, and sometimes complex lived experience. And so when I started working in Yoncalla, very early on, we redefined the leadership team. And I would say anybody that shows up to the leadership table is a leader. And so that reduced the barrier of needing to have a certain status or look a certain way or have a certain job in the community to be considered a leader. So if you are willing to sit at the table, you're a leader in our community. And so I think that really helped to shape the priorities. We were able to use that information about lack of access to healthcare to not only have really meaningful conversations with our coordinated care provider in our county, but then also to have conversations with the school board and the school administration to prioritize having a full-time nurse in our building. And we are the only school district in Douglas County that employs a full-time nurse. And she not only helps students with their identify when they need to be seen by a doctor, or whether they can be at school or they need to be at home, or all of the other things that go along with being a school nurse. But they also are able to see staff, which, believe it or not, have the same barriers as our parents, and then are also able to support parents. And so quite often, I would say 25% of the work that our school nurse does is seeing parents. We are a small little district that is looking into how can our district actually start receiving Medicaid billing. And so we are embarking on a pilot project here in the district about how can we support and sustain a school nurse in very, very trying times when a lot of our school district funding is being reduced. And again, that's all from those conversations with Sarah about having to take her 5 kids 30 miles away and missing a day of work and missing a day of school for students. And that's the power of transformative change when you engage with parents and staff.
If I can jump in, I don't know if it's a barrier necessarily, but it certainly is a challenge for us. And the challenge we have is parents getting their children to school. And because we're tutoring, we have volunteers that are coming in and tutoring, and they, when the students don't arrive, that's kind of deflating, because the volunteer's there, he or she's ready to go, and there's no student. And what we've also discovered is those students that that consistently do not show up are usually those students that are the poorest readers and really need the time with us, the time in school, to take care, to improve their reading. Since COVID, people don't believe necessarily that their children need to be in school. They didn't need to be in school during COVID, and maybe they don't need to be in school right now. What's kind of interesting also is I'm on the school board, and I do need to leave here in a couple minutes to attend a school board meeting here for our elementary school district. But what our superintendent has found is that when he talks to parents about their children being in school, many times they will tell him that what they do with their children is their business, and if they decide to keep their children out of school, that's what they're going to do. So it's taken on kind of a militant tone these days about what parents can do with their children. And as I mentioned, I do need to go off to a school board meeting. So with that, I will sign off. But again, thank you for the opportunity, and I appreciated hearing everybody else today. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Jerry. And I do think that speaks also, and I know you're going, but it speaks also to the hybrid model of your tutoring. In some ways, that is probably based in what works for the volunteers, but it also sometimes is addressing what works best for kids. So it's great to hear about how that program works.
Okay.
Anyone else on that question? And provide Jerry.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Alissa.
Go, Lori.
I think the only thing I would say is, because, to Khalil's point about not living in a rural area, but helping to, what we can do from my perspective, because we do have a network of read-on communities that's made up of members of those communities. And kind of harkening back to Michelle's point about access to data is, at Read On Arizona, we did create, sort of a one-stop shop for data that we know is impacting school readiness and early literacy, and that community members are able to utilize. And it's a tool known as Maplet, and you're able to see it from, a county perspective, district perspective, all the way down to your LEA perspective. But it's an opportunity for communities, rural communities, to have access to their data to help make informed decisions, even to drill down within their own community about, where resources, should be allocated. Or when we talk about, access to health and medical care, it has the ability to overlay that in the mapping system as well. Because we take for granted, to Sarah's point, putting 5 kids in a car and going 30 to 45 minutes and spending literally all day, at the doctor's office. And so it begins to kind of take into consideration that children have and families have barriers that are in place to accessing, whether it's a tutoring program or medical resources, or we think about rural schools who are providing vision and hearing screening because there's not an optometrist that's nearby. And so schools are able to then accept Medicaid in order to do that. So I think there are a myriad of barriers that rural communities face. As Khalil stated earlier, if you've met one rural community, you've met one. But what we try to do is put some level of information at their fingertips, so they're able to utilize that in order to make informed decisions or prioritize where funding goes, because we know there's not enough funding to go everywhere. But how do we prioritize perhaps where that funding goes, and what barrier of the day or the week or the month that they're able to tackle using that data?
One thing I was also thinking of, and Michelle's heard me talk about this a lot, but in order to solve some of the barriers in a community, you need that robust coalition and that true group of leaders like Sarah to be included, because otherwise you're missing what some of those barriers actually are. Or like Michele even said, you think it's transportation, but what really is the other barrier? And so if you are not truly creating opportunities and intentionally meeting with your families and figuring out, even for the school district, and maybe it doesn't need to come from the school district, it needs to come from one of your coalition partners who has trusted relationships with families and parts of your community to actually have their voices heard, and then say, okay, what can we do? Because also sometimes you have great assets and solutions to your problems within your community, but people are just not talking to each other. Or you have this great resource, but the families who really need it don't even know about it, which is why it feels like it's not reaching who you need it to reach. I mean, just last week I was on a call with the community actually here, and there is a transportation solution, and families can reserve it 24 hours in advance. It would pick them up from their house. But guess what? I didn't even know about it, and I live here, and this is the world I'm in. And so I'm like, okay, if I don't even know about this, there's no way those who actually would use this resource and need it and it would benefit them even know about it. So sometimes we got to go back there too. Let's look at what we can offer, and are we actually doing the best we can to connect it. Even as a teacher, and I'm sure Sarah can relate to, you see the needs of your students and your families, but if you don't know all of the resources available in your community to try to connect them, it's not that you don't want to. Sometimes you just don't know what else is out there that can support your kids and your families. So really knowing your community and taking advantage of your coalition and all your partners to look within your community, because usually there are some solutions there that can help address some of your barriers.
Thanks, everybody. So the question in the chat from Chan Weeks was about training videos for volunteer reading tutors, and she did get a couple of great suggestions. But if any of you have one and you want to post it in the chat, that would be great. And then I would like to turn to probably a final question for today, and from what I've heard all of you and others describe about funding the work in rural communities, and we talked a little bit about this, it often requires creativity and real collaboration. And so I'd love to hear a little about funding the work and if and how that's changed over time. But in particular, I want to make sure that we have time to hear from Michele, who has a fun story to share about funding in her community.
Okay, I'll go first and I'll go quick, I promise. I wanted Dolly Parton Imagination Library in Warren County so bad that I could taste it. And everybody that I went to said that they could not fund it. They could not fund it. They could not fund it. And, sometimes you can't make things happen even though you want to. And I have no patience at all whatsoever. So eventually I was like, okay, well, it's just not going to happen. Well, then one day out of nowhere, the human resource director at Batesville Casket, let me say that one more time, Batesville Casket reached out to me and asked me, why do we not have a Dolly Parton Imagination Library program in our community? And I was open and transparent, and I was like, okay, well, it's just going to be another one of those conversations where they're going to go, oh, that's great, I'm sorry. And she goes, we're going to fund it, 100% of it, forever. So we have a casket company actually investing in early literacy in our community. And it happened without me having to push it too terribly hard at all whatsoever, but it was because she was a part of our coalition and was interested in the work we were doing because she was a parent of early children. So be creative. Don't be afraid to ask anybody. Go to your local casket company and ask them to fund Dolly Parton Imagination Library. You'll never know. It may work.
Thanks, Michele. Any other quick stories before you close? It may, again, be hard to top that one.
I don't think we can top Michele's bag 'em and tag 'em for DPIL, so I think it might be a good story to end on for funding.
Agreed, Lori. Thanks. Well, I want to just thank all of you for joining this conversation with us, and also thank our amazing panelists, Kali, Erin, Sarah, Michele, Alissa, Lori, and Jerry. And it looks like the poll, if you couldn't see it, is back up. So if you could take a minute to do that poll, we would really appreciate it. So again, thanks to all of our presenters for this really rich and informative conversation. Excited to hear more as we go launch into the webinars upcoming. I do want to just mention that we have one that will be focused on rural resources. It's part of our Technology Enhanced Teaching and Learning Summer Institute that will be kicking off soon. And it will be the first webinar on June 24th. So be looking for that if you are interested in more conversation about what's going on in rural communities. But as you can see here, we also have some other exciting webinars coming up. If you missed early on the kickoff of the webinar, I'm just going to go through them quickly again. Later today, we have another in our series of More Hopeful Futures or Children as Collateral Damage focused on SNAP. Then next week, we'll have a funder to funder conversation focused on high quality children's media and philanthropic support for that. And then later that day, we'll have the webinar focused on Material Hardship Matters, Parents' Voices from the Rapid Survey, which is a terrific thing if you haven't heard of it to learn about. So we'll hope to see you at one of those webinars coming up. Thanks again, and hope you all have a great rest of your day.